Okay, and at this time, we're going to go ahead and commence the interview. I'm going to just formally introduce myself for the record. My name is Dr. Andrea Oliver. I have been a professor of history at Tallahassee Community College for 17 years. So I'm in my 17th year. And I am here with members of my my honors section of my Introduction to African American History class. This is part of what they're being asked to do in fulfillment of their capstone requirement for the spring semester. And with that, we'll go ahead and have each member of the team introduce themselves, and then we will start the interview. So we'll start with Ms. Stamper.
Hi, my name is Brianna Stamper. I'm in her history class, and I'm very excited to do this project. I actually looked you up before this, and I found the blog that your son, I believe, wrote for you, and it was just extremely impressive. So thank you for taking time out of your day to let us interview you.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here with you. This is a pleasant surprise for a Sunday afternoon.
Glad to hear it.
Okay, so next on our Zoom screen is Mr. Ryan Carmichael. I believe he's experiencing some kind of technical difficulty with his audio. So I guess you've been introduced. So Ryan, just wave.
Okay.
Hello. He too is a member of
Did you tell him all the good stuff?
Ma'am?
Did you tell him all the good stuff about the good old segregated South?
Well, they get their story, they get my anecdotes. Let's just say that. That it may come out in some of the follow-up questioning that comes along, because I really want this to be an organic conversation that's natural and just sort of flows.
Okay.
And Anathia, are you able to speak? I know we don't see you. We see, I don't know what that is. Is that what is that? What is that a picture of? Is that an opera hall or something? What is that?
What?
Anathia's profile here. Miss Lynn, can you hear us? Okay, hope she's not ghosting. We do have a third member. I'm not sure if she can hear us, but her profile's up anyway. So if she pops in, I guess she will let us know that. So we'll go ahead and get started. Brianna,
and these are all students in your class, right?
Yes, ma'am. These are all members of the TCC Honors and Scholars Program. Mm-hmm. And each semester, there's a constellation of courses that they're able to take towards earning the honors credential on their transcript when they get their AA degrees from us. Okay. I just got a chat message here from Miss Lynn. She too is having some kind of technical issue. She says she can't unmute. She's so sorry, but she is with us. And like the other two, I find her to be delightfully intellectually curious. They're very verbal, outspoken in class. It's too bad we're in the middle of a pandemic. I would love to have you sit in on some of our classes, but we certainly understand why that can't happen at this point in time. But we'll go ahead and get started with the interview. So Brianna, go ahead with your questions. Your audio appears to be the only one who's working. And I'm gonna mute myself and kind of bow out gracefully here.
Should I start with the biographical data form?
Yes, I think that would be appropriate.
Okay. So the first question we have for you is just some background information so that we can get to know you better before the formal questions of the interview. So the first one is your name.
I'm Vivian, Vivian, middle initial L, last name Hobbs, Hobbs.
And then your date of birth and place of birth.
Date of birth, I can't give you all of that on this kind of, I can't give you my date of birth. I'll give you my place of birth. How's that?
Okay.
I was born in Camilla, Georgia.
Gotcha.
Mitchell County, Georgia. There's been something in the news recently about Mitchell County.
And then where did you go to school, like elementary school, high school, your college experience?
I had a little of all of it. My mother's parents lived in Camilla, Georgia, and I had very first grade in Camilla, Georgia. And that was in a little church school. I guess they've come full circle now. They're going back to church schools and private schools and all of that. So I'll say, I guess the first one was the private school in first grade. Then we moved to Tallahassee, Florida. I attended Bond Elementary School, and I transferred to FAMU High School. It was FAMU High School then, Florida High and FAMU High, not developmental research schools, but that's been a while ago. I graduated from there in 1961. I moved across the street to Florida A&M University and received a BA in English with minors in history, Spanish, and they told me political science. When I go to apply for a job, I never say anything but English, but they tend to find other things, okay? So after that, I got married to my college sweetheart, and he was in the military. He went into the military, and from Tallahassee, we moved to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. And then from Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, we moved to Huntsville, Texas, while he attended Sam Houston State University. From there, we came back over here, the place that I love more than anything else. We came back over to the East Coast, as I call it. And we moved up to Fort Benning, Georgia for a while. So I was that sacrificial wife who sat and allowed her husband to do all of the things that he was trying to do while I reared the kids. That's the way it usually works out anyway, no matter the promises. From there, we went to Maryland. She was stationed at the Military Personnel Center there. First, we went to Virginia. I lived in Virginia and then moved over to Maryland. So I've been around the block.
Oh, wow, it seems like it.
We decided that it was my turn because we came back to Florida and I enrolled in Florida State University and received the MA in medieval and classical literature. And after that, I decided, oh, I kind of like this, being the student again. I enrolled in the PhD program at Florida State University. And I received the PhD in British Victorian and medieval literature. I did my dissertation on Guinevere. Have you heard of Guinevere? King Arthur, the Knights of the Round Table. Okay, that was my minor area and the one that I liked the best, really. So then I decided I really could go to work now and get what I deserved. So I went to work at Florida A&M University, and I worked there in the English department first for about 15 years, I guess. And then I decided I wanted to do my minor area, that's medieval. And I designed a couple of courses for the state of Florida. And I began teaching in the humanities department after that. So I was doing medieval history and literature in that department, same school. And after that, I have done all kinds of things while at the university. So I actually spent 32 years at Florida A&M University doing various things. One was SACS. Have you heard of SACS? That's where you have to meet all these credentials for your school to qualify and certify and all that. So I did that for a while. Well, I did it until we were certified. I guess it's about time for us to go again. And I'm glad I'm not there because of that. That's a lot of work, okay? But while there, I was appointed by the president, who was President Humphreys at that time. And that's why I smiled when she said the honors people, to take his honor scholars and enter into a contest called Honda Campus All-Star Challenge. And that's like College Bowl. In fact, the same person did both of those, all right? And
That's really,
I have 8 national championships, and I work with them right now from home like I'm working with you. And that's the very highest students that we bring in as far as grade point average and test scores and what have you. I take that bunch and put together a team, and we don't have questions to study or anything. We just have to know everything. So a humanities person, I tell people, is a person who knows a whole lot about a lot of things and nothing specific. That's what I call that degree, okay? So I do everything except the math, and I don't do much of the history. I impose upon Chuck to do a little history for me. But I'm still doing that team. Each time we've had a new president, they'll say, well, just hold on to that until we find somebody to do it. So I've been holding on to that. And this is my 32nd year with that.
oh, wow. So it's sort of like kind of like Brain Bowl.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
Ryan and I actually just got back yesterday from our Brain Bowl competition. We're 3rd in the state. Well, 3rd and 4th because we had 2 teams.
Oh, I like this bunch right here. I work with this bunch every day, even though I'm retired, but I work with this bunch, getting all the trivia, making sure they know all the mythology, all the religious scholars, and all everything else.
Well, I'm a little reticent to share this, if I may interject. I'm a little reticent to share this because I feel like I may get fussed at here. But I actually met President Humphreys back in 1989 when they did the FAMU and Bethune-Cookman used to host all the high school seniors in the state of Florida during Classics Week.
Yeah.
And myself and 3 of my good friends who all attended FAMU, the 3 of them went to FAMU. But we all got invited. I did not. You went to Bethune? No, ma'am. I went to Florida State.
That's okay.
I didn't go the other Garnet and Gold route.
Okay.
But I met President Humphreys, and he made an offer, or an offer was extended to me to participate in that program. And this was it would have been the fall of 90. I think was that the first year that you all started? First year,
and I went right out and won a championship. So you would have been famous.
Yeah, would have been famous. Look at that.
Yes. Yeah.
But there are some other factors that, long story short type of thing, but
I understand. And both of them are great schools. In fact, I have 2 degrees from each, so I kind of treat them equally.
Okay.
I don't have any
I almost got to work with you in that. That's awesome.
And more than that, I've done a lot of volunteer work. I'm still being interviewed, right? I was on the Board of Governors for the Florida Bar for 4 years, which was 2 years more than my tenure. I was on the Leadership Tallahassee Board for, oh my goodness, 2 years. And if you've heard of Jack and Jill, I served as president of Jack and Jill. There's an organization called Charmats, and much of that is centered around working with students and the youngsters. So I've been pretty busy. Once my husband turned me loose and decided he'd go to school as much as he wanted to, I decided to do some things I'd been wanting to do for a long time. And the kids were up, my kids were up so I could get out and do some things with them. I even did an ROTC program that became the first program the historically Black program in the nation. We were way up there as far as getting the students where they were supposed to be when it was time to go on to these big officer positions. The Department of the Army, I designed a program for the Department of the Army out of Washington, D.C., and it was administered through Tyndall Air Force Base. And I did that for 2 different periods of time. I would teach the officers who were becoming senior officers and those who were going into retirement. I would make sure that their writing skills and their speaking skills were impeccable so that would give them the upper edge about going into school. Now you're going to make me say I'm tired, but I'm really not. I enjoy everything I've done and everything I'm doing right now.
No, I love how much you love education.
Now, what's your major? What are you going to major in?
I'm doing social work and public policy.
Okay, that's a good field for you.
Thank you.
Okay, so
How
let's
many?
go ahead and get into the essay questions. Is that where you're headed next?
And be quiet and let her tell me.
So what do you remember about life before integration?
Oh my God, I was hoping you would save that for last because it's a nightmare and that'll take me off my high, but I will share it because I feel that I came out pretty much unscathed, except I have some terrible memories of that. I don't have any memories of slavery, of course, that was before my time. And my grandparents were not slaves, but they lived on plantations. And on these plantations, they did the work on the plantation for the boss, or the boss man, as they called him. I remember a little of that because I told you I went to school up in Georgia until I was 6 years old. And then we moved to Florida and we moved to a different kind of slavery. That's what I call it all. They worked from sun up to sundown when I was there. I remember that. And I'm talking about pretty much the kind of work they were doing. They were keeping house for the boss man. They were planting the fields. And the only thing we could do, or I'm saying we, but I mean my people, the only thing my people could do at that time was raise gardens at their home to take care of themselves and to do all the planting and all the cotton picking and all the tobacco picking and everything else that needed picking. And at the end of the year, they were not getting a salary for this. This was not salaried. They were not getting a salary. And at the end of the year, they were just free to get whatever the boss man decided that they deserved for that year, or based upon, he said, upon the money that he brought in, he gave them a percentage, but I never believed that. I've always been one of those curious, inquisitive kinds who spent a lot of time with my grandfather, who had not really bought into this slavery thing. And he taught me a lot of things that probably most kids didn't know about what was going on at that time. That was another form of slavery. And the worst thing I remember is, though, when I was in high school down here at FAMU High, since we don't have forever to talk about this, when I was in high school down here at FAMU High, I know you must have heard of a Reverend C.K. Steele. Have you heard of him, any of you? The C.K. Steele Plaza downtown where the buses go? And he had the church Bethel Baptist over on Tennessee Street at that time. And I actually was in the presence of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, because they were good friends when we started this. And FAMU, of course, was very, very active in the sit-ins, in the demonstrations. You're taking me back to a time when we had a McCrory's 5 and dime store here. I guess they were the equivalent of the dollar stores. We had a McCrory's 5 and dime here, and we had a Woolworths, just like you've read about in probably some of your classes, Carolina and other places. And they had counters in there where you could go shop downtown all day Saturday, give them all the money you had, which wasn't much. And they had lunch counters separate, and they were not equal, okay? And that's the part I remember so vividly, the separate and unequal rather than separate and equal. And that was kind of hard for me to understand. I mean, I was an only child, really filled up with self-importance. I had a grandparents, I was an extended family, grandparents there, mother there, the apple of everybody's eye. But then I always felt that there was something wrong with my not being able to sit where I needed to sit in that McCrory's when I'm spending the same amount of money that they were spending there, the others were spending there. Now that kind of stayed with me forever. But more than anything else, we could not go out at night. That was one of the things, because as much as I hate to talk about the KKK, the things that we did, that's as Black females and males in my age group, most of our activities were either church related or school related. We didn't have an outside life like you guys have. We didn't have telephones. We didn't have TikTok. We didn't have television. We read a lot, and consequently, I became a great reader and still am a great reader. So I was at home a lot. But our parents were afraid to let us go out at night. We had one drive-in theater. It's over there near the big post office over off of Monroe Street. It's not there anymore, but that's where it was. And the parents, we didn't have cars. The parents would take us, and we would get out the cars and sit on the grass and meet out there and talk. We couldn't go to McDonald's. we could do any of this. Everything we ate, we had to eat it before we left home because nobody would serve us. We could not go in. And McDonald's was probably one of the first who decided to build a little window around the back, and they would serve us what we wanted. So they wanted our money, what little we had, but they didn't want our presence. And I always thought that that was wrong. I had a strong sense of what was right and what was wrong. And I'm saying, I'm the apple of everybody's eye over here. Why can't I go in there and sit down? I had a lot of questions, some similar to what you're asking now. Those were horrific times for me. And then as I grew, that continued. Florida A&M became very, very involved with the civil rights movement here in Tallahassee. I saw, well, not saw, but I lived during the times of brutal rapes where whites would go and take people out of cars and do all kinds of things. So it was a horrific childhood. And you know what? It has not changed that much. And I don't know if I'm supposed to take you there. I'm still growing. It just went undercover, if I think I want to put it that way. We don't have the Klansmen riding around with the sheets and the hoods and bombing houses and snatching people out of cars to get raped and all of that, not openly, but some of the things, same attitudes are still here. So what I guess I learned, I guess the thing that hurt me most when I was growing up was at the time I graduated from high school, and I'm taking you all around the world, but that's where you're taking me. When I graduated from high school, I had one of the highest scores in the state of Florida on a test that was called the Florida State High School Test. We weren't taking the ACT and the SAT, but it was fashioned similarly to the ACT. I grew up in White City. Now, let me tell you where White City is. If you know where the stadium is, FSU Stadium, where they just can't quit building, I guess it'll reach the heavens like they intended for the medieval cathedrals to be. There were houses over there. That was a Black neighborhood. There was a church over there. That was our little area. We had a store over there. And I could not go to school over there. That was the worst thing. I lived literally on Florida State's campus when I finished high school, but I could not go to Florida State. I had to walk maybe 3 or 4 miles to Florida A&M University. So from the stadium all the way up to the other school. I always thought that was wrong because I wondered, well, what in the world could I do to a student who's here for the same thing I'm here for to learn? So I was one of those curious people who was I never quite accepted what our role was at that time. And I was very happy to see the civil rights movement and some of the actions from that. Another thing that hurt me was I could not go to FSU when I wanted to go. And that was one of the reasons I chose to go to FSU, come back to Tallahassee and go to FSU. I wanted to see what it was I missed when I was in high school and could not go, okay? I had more fun at Florida A&M anyway, met my husband at Florida A&M anyway, so I don't have any regrets about that, all right? But another thing that still bothered me is the shopping downtown. As an only child, I had so many clothes, had great taste. Only children, you know how only children are. We could not try on, we could spend $5,000 in that store, and we were not permitted to try on anything in the store. You had to take it home. And if the lady liked you, and I can think of 3 or 4 shops and won't call any names because it may be some of your relatives. But anyway, I won't talk about that. But if they liked you, you might be able to bring them back if they were sure that you had not damaged them. But you could not try them on in the stores. Now that really hurt a lot. I thought that wasn't right. How are they going to take my money for the clothes? Let me take them home. And if they don't work, bring them from my Black house all the way back to the store and keep them. But I can't try them on in not any facility downtown. And I'm talking about all of it. Downtown was a lovely place to be. Beautiful shops, beautiful restaurants, theaters, but we couldn't go to those, and kind of bothered me. We had one Black drive-in theater and one Black theater over on Tennessee Street near the Popeyes over there. Bar and Arto, have you seen that place over near Frenchtown? Okay, that was one of the places. Our theater was over there. And if they had a good movie showing, you couldn't get but say 100 people in there. So that meant you didn't get to go then. You were gonna have to figure out another time to go and pray that it didn't move that they didn't take the movie away before it was time to go. So that's some of the early things. And I know you are so attentive. I could sit here and talk to you all day, but I'm gonna wait and hear some more questions.
Can you not unmute, Brianna? You have a problem unmuting? Oh, I did that?
I believe you might have done that to Anathea and possibly Ryan as well, because they're saying that they can't unmute themselves.
Okay, well.
Hi there.
Okay, there you go.
There's our third member.
Hi, it's so nice to meet you.
Okay, so Zoom is tripping because that, I don't know why that's like that. It's not supposed to be like that. It's bad, folks.
So Anathea or Ryan, did you want to ask the next question on the sheet, or did you want me to while you guys pulled up the documents?
I did have to disconnect for a second. Did you just ask the first one, or did you ask about the conscious?
I've only asked the first one.
Okay. I feel like you, in some extent, kind of already touched on it, but in more specificity, do you remember when you first became conscious of your color and what that meant, the effects that that had? Can you describe the moment that you became conscious of that separation?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question. Was that a question for me?
Yes, it is. I hate to have to ask for this because I know it's probably not a great moment, but can you remember when you became conscious of the separation, of the difference that it meant to be of color, what that meant for your lifestyle and how you were living? You became conscious of your color.
From the day I was big enough to put the bottle down, you know, the baby bottle, I noticed that there were differences, okay, because everywhere I went, I was an only child, I said. So I spent a lot of time with my parents and grandparents. Whatever their errands were, those were also my errands. So I started from a little one up to be quizzical. Why can't I do this? That was the thing. So when I was told, because you just can't, that was not reason enough for me. I have always been a very inquisitive person. Well, why can't, you know, each question leads to another question. And they would say, well, you just can't do that because blacks, people of our skin tone, aren't allowed in places like this. So I would say, to give you a good age guess, it would be between 2.5 and 3 years old.
Yeah.
And it was because of the different treatment that we received in very, what I consider to be very public places. Oh, another thing, when we used to, everybody didn't have a car, so we used to catch the bus, the city bus that goes around now. I guess it still does. We would have to go to the back. There was a little area in the back with lots of things where you could hold on to straps up on the wall if you ran out of those seats, while the whole half front of the bus may be empty, but we weren't allowed to sit in those empty seats, just like Rosa Parks. That's not an exaggeration, okay? I didn't think that was right either, because I had put the same 10 cents in there that the others had put in.
Yeah.
You know, as an interesting aside, I have 3 student teams in all, inclusive of this team, that are interviewing respective people of the same generational cohort. And I do have a couple of groups who are speaking to Caucasians. And I'm curious, I'm wondering if the conscious, you know, the conscious awareness of your racial identity, I'm wondering if that was the same for Caucasians as it was for African Americans. Because
I just thought of something that he asked me that I want to expound on a little bit more. When did I become aware of it? And this hurts me to the day. I'm talking to the young man who asked me that question, because I haven't seen the questions. I'm kind of pulling things from my head as you ask them. So I'd like to revisit that. When I really, really became aware of the difference was that when we were growing up, my grandmother worked for this white lady in her home, and our house was very close to that. We didn't own it, of course, but that was a part of what I call the sharecropping type thing. I'll give you a place to live if you'll come and do this for us. There was a little guy whose name was Don, and I won't give a last name, as I said, because they may be related to some of you. And we were actually the same age, and we played together. When my mother would go up to his house to work, she was not going to leave me to my house alone. So I would go up there with her. We would play outside, we would play inside. If he had lunch, I had lunch. But all of a sudden one day, I guess this was several years later, I didn't understand. That was my friend. I was an only child, and that was my best friend. Okay, Don was my best friend. And one day, he came to tell me, I can't play with you anymore. And I'm saying, oh, what did I do? And he said, you didn't do anything, but my parents said that we're getting too big to play together because you are Black and I'm white. But I will always be your friend. I will look over you. And he used to follow me sometimes in cars when I was walking to the bus. He'd honk the horn. This was when we were getting to be that kind of age. And I knew that he was still looking over me, but we weren't allowed to be friends anymore. Now that probably hurt more than anything that ever happened to me. And that probably colored my attitude about Caucasians.
Really unfortunate.
Wow.
And
All right.
Athea, do you want to ask the next question?
Hi there. Sure. That was a very heartbreaking story. Thank you so much for sharing. Our next question is, how do you believe, how did segregation impact you personally? Which I feel that story was definitely something that answered that question, but I definitely would like to hear more from you on that subject, if you're comfortable with sharing.
Well, I am very glad you asked me that, because that pulls me out of this mood of anger, because I just became angry all over. Somebody doesn't tell you I can't be your friend because of your skin tone. Now that still bothered me, and that bothered me all my life. It's happened when we went into the military. I told you my husband went into the military, and I was with mostly whites because he was an officer. These were my husband's bosses. So I had to get along. You had to put your personal feelings aside to survive in that type of an environment, okay? So I was able to do that. But the one thing it did for me educationally was I wanted the opportunity to go to, you will never guess where, to Florida State. That's all those years, because they denied me when I had the grades to get in there and I had the test scores, and I wanted to show everybody over there, wherever I could go, where I could exhibit my grand knowledge. I wanted to show them that I was not only smart enough to be there, I was smarter than most of those who were there. So that's how that kind of segregated situation affected me. I wanted to compete, and I still love competing. And it was a racial thing that inspired that, huh?
I'm sorry. I wanted to ask a follow-up question because you evoked Florida State, my beloved alma mater. Your son once shared with me a story about a B+ that you received. Was it on an assignment or in a class or something? And I think it kind of reflects.
That's another thing. I went there. I told you I went for the master's because they were not offering masters in English. They were offering an English ed at Florida State, Florida A&M, but not in English. And I wanted mine in Arthurian legend and classical literature. I wanted it in that, okay? So I went where it was expedient for me to go, where it was being offered. And I went to this was a British, believe it or not, a British professor, and I'm getting a degree in British literature, a British professor who was teaching me, I can't even remember the name of it, but I remember him, had to write a paper. And the thing of it is that your school and my school, yours that you speak fondly of and I speak tolerantly of, okay, now you're getting the real truth, okay? There are some wonderful people over there. I don't want you to mistake me. One of my best friends in the whole world died, and that was Dr. Stanley, Fred Stanley, who was in the English department. And he was Caucasian, and I loved him to death. I even went to his funeral. Anyway, we had they have they had, I don't know if they still have, the only way you could get an A out of a course is if you had made all A's, A's on exams and A's on papers. You could get a minus and a plus on the papers that were given back to you, but you knew that once you got a plus on a paper, you were not gonna get an A out of that course, right? So it was all of this time, I'm saying, boy, I'm doing good in this course. I'm teaching full time at FAMU and taking 12 hours at a time over there. I told you I had to show everybody how good I was in this stuff. In fact, when I went over to register, where is my lady who went to Florida State all the time? I want to look at her. When I went to register over at Florida State to the English department, I was told by the secretary in the English department, I think you have the wrong department. You probably mean English ed. So I played the dummy to get what I wanted. I said, is English ed where they teach Shakespeare and Arthurian legend? She said, no, that's in this department. I said, well, I think I'm where I'm supposed to be. So she had to call around and find out if they were accepting any more students into that grad program. Needless to say, I did get in. And this professor that we're talking about, that my son was talking about, and I will remember him, and I hope he rots in hell, and I'm going to put it that way. You're smart children. He told me, we did a paper. I got a B with 3 pluses on it. B plus, plus, plus. So I was livid. I'm saying, okay, now do I leave this program over here and try to go to weekend college down at University of Florida? They got a little bit more class than that. Of course I said it. So I said, no, go and see him. Perhaps he can tell you, because you want the degree and you want it in what you want. You're married, you have kids, you're working, you need to be in Tallahassee. So let me see if I can work. I got tired of trying to work things out because of people's attitudes. So I went to see him on a good day. I'd had lunch, dressed up very professionally. And I went in and I said, I would please like some assistance, not going in accusatory or anything like that. I would like some assistance, please. And he said, yes. I said, what can I do, taking it all on myself, to turn a B with 3 pluses on it into at least an A minus? That would do better for my psyche to get an A minus rather than a B with 3 pluses. So he reluctantly took the paper from me. I said, could you probably offer me some suggestions? There were no comments on the paper. No, you should have done this. You should have said that. This is wrong. Nothing, just a B with 3 pluses on it. I said, could you possibly tell me what I could do to improve, because I'm in this for the long haul? And he told me, well, I don't know what I could tell you. You just sound so American. Okay. In my language, it was American and not British, I guess. I said, okay. So I'm probably relegated, since I am an American, and I don't say that proudly all the time. Since I am an American, can I probably expect, and my language is not British, can I probably expect B pluses on papers then? And he kind of smiled. And I said, well, thank you, sir, for your time. He never answered, okay? So we know what that was. You don't have to be a scholar to figure that out. And of course, I got a B out of the course. I didn't get a B plus plus on the grade, I got a B. Now, they saw finally that I'm not gonna allow them to run me away. They were tolerant, I'll put it that way. Not welcoming, but tolerant. And what I figured about my Florida State is that if you stick around long enough and they get sick of you and they see you not going away, then they will begin to work with you. And that's when I met Dr. Fred Stanley. And I said, and we became great friends, he and his wife, Dr. Jane Stanley, who's in the music department over there still, I think. And he said, there's nothing wrong with this. In fact, this is publishable, and I'm going to send it to one of my organizations over which I am the president, and I'm going to see what they think about it. He was taking me on all kinds of trips, like they do grad students over in graduate school. And he was very proud of me, and he showed me a different side of the faculty in that English department over there. There's one that I had that was a humanities professor. If we are standing next to each other, and this has actually happened, and I'm not one you can easily forget, got a lot of mouth, and I'm usually pretty articulate, they say, we could be standing right next to each other in the supermarket, and he won't see me, and I won't see him. And that's been 30 years ago almost. Well, 27. So those are the kinds of things that I experienced over there. I also experienced another kind of thing with the Black students who were enrolled over there. And I have to share this. So I wasn't catching a break anywhere I was, if that's the question you asked. The Black students who had been admitted over there, here I am, very much an adult with 3 children, and here I am standing in the hall, and a young lady who was Black walked by me, and she did not speak, did not look, did not nod, didn't do anything, and there were just the 2 of us in the hall. So she went wherever she was going and couldn't find the room that she sought. So she came back, all smiles. How you doing, ma'am? Do you know where, I let her talk, do you know where such and such a room is? And I said, yes, I do. I know exactly where it is. Well, could you help me find it? I said, I will not. I said, you walked by here like I was a non-person. So you are a non-person now. Find it yourself.
Wow.
Okay. Those are the kinds of things I went through at Florida State. But I learned a lot. And I met a few good people at that time. I'm talking about 30 years ago. It's probably a whole lot better now, and I hope it is. Because right now, my favorite granddaughter at that age, I only have 2 granddaughters. One is 12 and one is 27. So I'm dealing with favorite granddaughter. Each one of them is my favorite granddaughter, whichever one I'm with, okay? And I do different things with both of them. I was absolutely flabbergasted when she chose to go to Amherst College up in Massachusetts. Full scholarship, $96,000 a year. And I'm saying, but why do you want that? And she said, because I have been going to the schools here, Leon and others, right? And she said, I feel comfortable with that group. I said, well, I guess that's reason enough for me to understand if you feel comfortable with that group. She was not very comfortable with her people. Now, the one that's 12, on the other hand, that's Chuck's daughter, is just the opposite. So it's fun for me trying to catalog these 2 granddaughters and how they differ and how they're alike. Both of them are very bright, but very, very different. And then that didn't suit the elder one. She wanted to go to Georgetown after that. So I paid for a summer at Georgetown. And right now, I guess she decided that things were a little bit different from what she decided to move to Rabat, Morocco. And she's been over there for 5 years. So I'm saying, maybe something I call her my late bloomer. Maybe some of the things I tried to tell her, she became aware of. But I have stories to tell, and you're horning in on my book, okay, that I'm writing about the good old South in those days. That's okay, though. I got so many stories to tell. They're not pretty, but I learned from them all. But the one thing you want to know how nobody asked this, but I'm going to volunteer it. You know how I learned to survive in a world that was that kind of world at that time? I learned that nothing anyone could do would never make me feel less than who I was. And I grew up as a special child with all my folks as that only child. I always thought I was better than most. So I took that with me everywhere I went, and no one has ever made me feel like I didn't belong. I felt like they didn't belong. If they're that stupid and narrow-minded, then you don't belong here.
Wow.
Now, that's where I am. And I'm ready to answer some more questions.
I really like that last, like how you learned how to survive. I really like how you took that and like did something productive with it. Yes. Because it's really hard to hear about stuff like this because it's just like not good. The next question is, what role, if any, did your faith or the church family play in your life during these times?
Well, we were very religious. We were Southern Baptists, but not some of the Bible carriers like some others are. We were Baptists back then. I told you that everything that we did socially was either church oriented or school oriented. We couldn't go and do other things. If it were movies, it was family oriented. If it were parties, it was house parties where families are getting together. And we wanted to go out, then it was church. I sang in the choir and I did all kinds of things for other activities, but that was still around adults who were familiar adults.
Ryan, do you have the next question?
So I know you mentioned moving on account of your husband, but did segregation affect your decision to move or to come back? Did it affect your decision as far as living? And in general, you know, what else do you remember?
Yes, let me tell you what I learned. I grew up thinking, oh my God, I can't wait to get out of the South. I left the South for the first time to live in Kansas. I did mention that. I don't know if you'd come on then. I found that people are no different, no matter where they are. If you're Black, and that's still an issue, you are a lesser human being. I welcome opportunities when I can show them I'm not a lesser human being. I'm better than you because I'm probably smarter than you. So that's how I have survived. And I learned that the South was no different from the North, from the West, from the Midwest. It was all the same. If you were Black, you were still a slave in their own heads. I have had to go, and when we were in Kansas, my goodness, I've been in there to shop because we lived at Fort Leavenworth, which was a few miles away. And I would almost have to plead with someone, would you please take this order? I need to go. They working in the store and they didn't want to wait on me in the store. And I'm talking about stores like Macy's and other stores, okay? You'd have to almost go beg them to take this money so I can get out of here. If I walk out of here, you'll have all the policemen after me. I need this item. So would you please wait on me? So I found that it was no different. In fact, when I was living in Texas, you know how you have a check, a joint check with your husband or spouse or whatever it is you have? It had Colonel Charles E. Hobbs Sr. and Vivian L. Hobbs. This lady in this jewelry store said to me, yes, I'll wait on you. And you could tell she was reading. She was reading over Colonel and whatever. And finally she got Vivian. And I said, well, what's your name? It's right here. I said, no, that's Mrs. Somebody. What's your other name? I said, now you got to go get your manager and tell me why you can call me Vivian and I got to call you Mrs. Somebody. She got real busy and got me out of the store. She waited on me with the quickness, invited me back, okay? So it's no different. It's everywhere. And that's the same now with the, this is what I have observed, and this isn't what we're talking about. It's a little bit different when you have the Mexicans who owned Texas and California and everywhere else. I told you I have a minor in history until we took it. The Japanese internment camp, you know, they didn't want them over here. They only wanted people brought over from Europe who were blonde and blue-eyed. So I call it the Hitler attitude, that Aryan nation type attitude. Most of them still have that. And I hate that because I don't really judge a person by their color. And I will give you, you might think that I'm a bitter, angry person. I'm not. I'll give anybody a chance. And I have lots of white friends. I don't want you to get that wrong. I do have some. But I'll tell you the one thing that makes me just a little bit different, it goes back to that Don syndrome. I don't know when they're going to come and say, I can't be friends with you anymore. Some things that happen to you when you're real young, they stay with you forever. So I'll say I'm less trustful, I'll put it that way, of somebody who is not my color. Now, I'm mistrustful of some of them too. And at a class at Florida A&M, I used to have 52 through 200 people in a class almost. They asked me once, because I had a Jew sitting up to my desk on one side, a Roman Catholic on the other side, and the most militant Black Muslim I could find sitting in front of me, and the rest of the class was out there, but those people were determined to fight. So I'm saying, well, okay, you got to come through me, because they didn't agree on anything, okay? So finally one asked me, and I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you because I like scholarship and you're scholars, and scholars will probably understand what I'm saying. If I were talking to someone else, I probably wouldn't say this. Said, Dr. Hobbs, are you prejudiced? I said, now wait a minute, let me think about that. Okay, so let me think for a minute, just be quiet, let me see if I'm prejudiced, and I'll tell you the truth. So I said, there's a difference in being prejudiced and being racist. I'm not racist. I said, now let me give you a good example before you decide that you're gonna go drop my class and tell them I'm down here teaching racism or whatever. They know I'm gonna teach whatever I want to teach anyway. I've been here that long. I said, if you, that was a Black right, that was talking to my Jew right here and my Roman Catholic. I said, you're the Muslim right here. I said, I'm gonna go beyond this little semicircle here, right out here to one of the other students. I said, we know that you're Black, African-American, Baptist, and we know that you're what? Roman Catholic, okay? Hispanic, all right? Nothing wrong with being a Roman Catholic, all right? Hispanic. I said, if you two were applying for the same job and your credentials, this is the key word here, credentials, and your credentials were absolutely the same, and my voice would favor one over the other, I would probably give it to the African American, because they have been denied so many things that I thought they were due. I probably would. And I know that if you were as good as this one over here that I'm recommending, you're gonna get a job anyway, 5, 10, 15 jobs. And he probably won't get any. He would be passed over many times before you would. So I said, now you decide whether I'm prejudiced or not. I said, in other words, I'm going to be fair with you. Yes, I am prejudiced, but I am fair. I said, now on the other hand, if that person over here was not qualified, I wouldn't select the Black one over you. But your qualifications are the same. And yes, I would go with that other one. So I said, that's where I am. So don't ask me that anymore, okay? If you make an A, I'm going to give you an A. If you make an F, I'm going to give you an F. It doesn't matter what color you are. But I'm not going to let you fight in my room, okay? So that's where I am.
Okay, are we at the part of the interview where we're getting into the era of desegregation? If that's where we are, let's go ahead and get to that, because Dr. Hobbs has some experiences there. She is what I would refer to as a bridge educator, someone who has one foot in the era of segregation and the other who then bridged over as the schools were desegregating. So we want to get into her discussion on those experiences there. So I don't have the questions in front of me either, but I know that there's a couple of questions that speak to that. So let's go ahead and move to that part of the interview.
Okay.
Excellent. I actually do have a question to ask you, ma'am, about this desegregation time period. What were some local incidences of conflict or cooperation between the races that you recall as things started to integrate?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand her question.
She said,
I'm sorry.
could you recount some incidences of either cooperation or conflict as integration? And I try to be I'm a real stickler for semantics. I have often told my students that I don't really think that what happened was integration. We never really integrated.
I never wanted to integrate, believe it or not.
We desegregated, which, we legally ended the practice of legally separating people by race, on paper. That did come to an end. But as far as integration, that to me suggests something else, something that's more holistic, something that again is more organic. That never happened. we just sort of threw people together, and it wasn't really intentional. And yeah, it wasn't intentional. And one community lost a whole lot more than another in terms of community integrity and things of that nature. So I think that what she's wanting to know is, can you maybe speak to some of those incidences of cooperation or either conflict in that desegregation process?
I tell you, but you know what the Caucasians did not know is that most of us did not want integration. I didn't want integration, but I didn't want to be denied the same things that others had because of my skin tone. There is a difference, okay? Now, let me tell you about an example of this. I got an example for everything, okay? I tell you, I went to work one time down in Cocoa Beach, Florida, because my first child was asthmatic. So they said being around salt water would probably help her with her breathing, help her lungs develop, or whatever it was. It didn't, but that's what I thought I was doing. And I struck up a very good friendship with the superintendents of schools, who was actually housed in Titusville, Florida, rather than Cocoa Beach. And he said, boy, I wish you would stay down here with us forever, because I was saying what I want, why I was there. That was because of the asthma and the whatever. And I was really looking for something kind of part-time or substitute or something like that, not looking for a full-time job. So he would always call me and tell me when something was coming up, but I couldn't make those kinds of decisions. Husbands make those kinds of decisions back when I was growing up, okay? So we were in the military, are we gonna move, or are we gonna stay here? I went where I could go, right? So when I came to Tallahassee, I'm saying, oh my goodness, Sterling Bryant, and I will call his name, is now the superintendent of schools. I had been away and traveled to other places, came back to Tallahassee looking for a job. Oh my God, I have found my niche right now. Sterling Bryant is here. So I called him and said, this is Vivian. He said, I haven't forgotten you. You work for me down. I said, yes. He said, come on by to see me. This was over at Florida High, now Florida Demonstration School or whatever it's called. Come on by, I have a job for you. I said, okay, check with you tomorrow, then I don't have babysitters. Went over to see Mr. Bryant. And this was when, right after they were trying to integrate the schools, you probably taught them all about Little Rock, Arkansas, and other places where they could not go to school, or where you had to get the National Guards to come in. The Kennedys, whom we thought were just the most liberal people we'd ever seen. Robert Kennedy bringing in the National Guards. We got Wallace down there standing up with segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. See, I remember all this kind of stuff. So I'm saying, well, let me go over here and see what he has for me. He went over there and he told me, I'm going to hire you to teach advanced composition, because that's what I taught all while I was everywhere. That was what my experience was in, okay. To seniors. And I said, good. He said, may give you a humanities class or two. I said, that would be perfect, a combination of the two. And somehow the president of the United States of America and the Supreme Court decided to give the Deep South a reprieve, give them a year to get everything worked out. Therefore, he had to call me and tell me, we have another year. So if you are still interested next year, when it's really forced, I would be happy to have you. So I told him, thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to be the same Vivian Hobbs that I was next year, that I am right now. The big problem was, though, with that, especially with the schools, is they didn't want Blacks disciplining white students. Now, that's the main thing with the school and the segregation. I experienced that out in Godby. I worked all around places around here. Now, I know all about Godby High School. They didn't want us to discipline those kids there. You want a parent to come in. When I was at Lincoln High School, which was the premier school before the one named after the governor, what's his name? Childs, before Childs, Lincoln High was the premier school at that time. And I had a little student in the class, and she was in AP. I taught AP English out at Lincoln High School. And she said, why did I get this C on this paper? I said, because I was being kind to you, and I wrote you 25 reasons why you got that C. And if you violate, I made me a copy, and if you violate those reasons again, that will become an F, because you have some serious problems in this paper, and I have enumerated them for you. Well, now, I didn't know that the governor of the state of Florida, her mother was his secretary. Not that it would have made any difference, but who is this Black teacher who's coming out here giving my child a C on a paper with all the reasons that I gave it to her? So she came, I'm going to tell my parents. I said, okay, you do that. And I'm here until 4 o'clock every day. And if you want to work with me how to get some writing done, I'll work with you on that too. Tell them that. So the mother came. And I said, but you know what? I told you me and my attitude that I grew up with. You remember I told you how I always thought I was as good as or better than anybody else? I said, I went on the attack. I said, I don't want your daughter in my class anymore. I said, because she challenged me when I took my time and told her everything that was wrong. The only thing that she saw was a C. She didn't see what was wrong that caused her to get that C. And I don't want to waste my time on a student like that. There are so many here who want to learn and so many that I want to teach. So I really don't want her in my class anymore. And there are other classes for AP. Would you kindly go up there and get her? Honey, that lady's begged me, please keep her. This is where she needs to be. And I had to get that point across to them, because I was not going to let the governor's secretary come and teach my English class, okay? So I've had my little ways of feeling good about what I was doing, okay? It's still not like it should be, though. It is awful. And I feel so sorry for everybody who's coming up during these times, because like I said, it was just hidden. That's the same thing that happened if you talk to these historians after they decided that we had to integrate way back a long time ago, after some of them laws that were passed up there. Schools, you got to desegregate these schools after Little Rock and all those places. They did it another way. That's the same thing with the voting. They have their ways of achieving their ends. I think that's what I'm trying to say. And those have not gone away. They went underground, as I call them, but they're still there. And I'm one of those who can tell you right off whether it's black, white, because some of us are prejudiced too. Now, I'm not putting it all on anybody, okay? But I can tell you right away where somebody's not to be trusted. I can just look at them and tell it, because I grew up when I knew what it was and they didn't try to hide it. Because after all of those schools started and the voting rights came out, you know good and well, that's when they started riding with the sheets and the hoods on then and bombing houses and all that, or count the number of beans in that jar on the wall before you can vote. They have done some atrocious thing. And the best thing for me to do is for them to admit that they have. I'm not even asking for any reparation. I could take care of myself. They don't owe me anything. They probably owe my parents, great grandparents who were working on those farms and stuff. They owe them some reparation and taking the land and all that. They don't owe me a thing. All I ask is just to be treated fairly and with dignity. And I'm willing to treat anybody with fairness and dignity.
Wow, Dr. Hobbs, you have spent just an amazing amount of time just sharing you have such a life story. It's so profound. I'm pleased to hear that you are writing a book because you certainly have some stories to tell. I'm gonna let Brianna ask the last question, because the last question of our interview and the last question, Brianna, that is on the question form asks our subjects to make those connections between their past experiences and things that we are witnessing now. Mm-hmm. And since Dr. Hobbs has already sort of gone in that direction, let's just go ahead and ask that last question so that we can maybe bring this to a close.
Right. You know what? I have enjoyed this. I was reluctant to do it. Chuck is forever committing me to something that I haven't agreed to. And I think I was reluctant to do it, not because I didn't want to talk about it, but it was because I'm saying, oh, that might get some emotions stirred up here that I had placed neatly in a bag and put away. But I have enjoyed this immensely. Your kids are very bright, I can tell. They're very indulgent. They sat and listened. Nobody wanted to argue. You have them well prepped. And look for my book. I'm going to write this book for you. And I'm going to dedicate it to you and your class.
Oh, gosh, I don't want to cry. Golly, that's amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you. And we often hear that. I really feel as if, you remind me a lot of my great aunt. She had a profound impact on my life, so much so that I named my firstborn daughter after her.
Oh,
And
okay.
a lot of what you say, she was one of the first African-American teachers to desegregate, the formerly all-white school. She had a 41-year teaching career in Madison County.
Mhm.
And a lot of what I grew up hearing her say is a lot
Yeah.
of what I've heard you say today. Everything from we didn't necessarily want to integrate, and it wasn't about, I tell my students this, it
Mhm.
wasn't about being in the proximate space. It was
Right.
about the resources. We
Right.
wanted the
Resources.
resources. That's all we wanted. We wanted
Right.
the resources and an equal opportunity. We weren't looking for equality of outcomes. We were looking for equal opportunity. And Zora Neale Hurston even said as much too. I'm sure you're familiar with a lot of her writings
Oh,
on,
yeah.
us being forcibly, taken out of our safe places, if you will. But at any rate, I want to let Brianna go ahead and draw the interview to a close with this last question, which I know you will have some really profound thoughts for us on.
Okay.
Go ahead, Brianna.
I have enjoyed this.
One more question.
I
You're
know,
talking
Brianna.
about the question about like where society is heading, right? Just so like I'm on the same page as you, Professor.
Do it again.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
The one that asks, it references the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, and talks about like where we are now.
Okay.
Yeah, you see it?
So this question's a little long. So if
Okay.
you need me to like rephrase it at the end, just let me know. So it says 2014 marked the 50th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and 2015 marked the 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act. In your opinion, what has been areas of the greatest positive change, and what areas is there a lot of work left to be done with respect to race relations here locally? What are your feelings about Obama's election and re-election as a statement of how far we've come or how much further we have yet to go in that area?
You know what? I was one of those, to be perfectly honest with you. I was one of those who had mixed emotions about electing Barack Obama for our president. Now, let me tell you why I had mixed emotions. It was an honor to have a Black president. It was long overdue. I didn't mean that. But I think that a lot of people, especially my age and probably older, and maybe some younger, felt that if they did this, this would clear up all of the mean things that they had done for thousands of years. Okay, they thought this would be the thing that would make everything clear and everything would be all right. So I'm saying, no, Obama's election isn't going to do a thing except here's a person that's half white, half African. This has nothing to do with us who have been here and gone through the struggle and the strife. And I was glad for him to be on that wall up there when they have presidents, a man of color. I was glad to see that. Just like I was glad to see Mr. Thomas, Chief Justice Chalmers up there. So the thing had been white all the time. Let's put some color up there. Thurgood Marshall, let's do this. But things really haven't changed. They have just found other ways to do the same thing that they were doing before. Does that make sense to you?
Yes,
They
ma'am.
have, and I call it sometimes to my youngsters, they've gone undercover and they've come with this. So they got the computers, they've got this, and they can go and bother with this, they can bother with that. But now we have a group. In fact, you know what? Now you're gonna faint when I say this, and I want you to listen, everybody. Do you know that I thought that President Trump would make a good president? My reason was that he was too arrogant to lie. He was going to tell you the truth.
Yep.
And just tell me the truth where you are. If you still think I'm a third-class citizen, then that's okay. I'm not going to worry about it. But I think he was honest in what he was, and honesty is what we need. If you watch the hearings any at all this week with this Harvard person here. I actually cried one night. And there was a Lindsey Graham. Do you know who Lindsey Graham is? A South Carolina senator. I've
Yes, ma'am.
always felt that he was fairly bright and liked him a lot until he talked to this person right now that's running, Miss Jackson, that's running for, that is trying to be certified for Supreme Court justice, like she was a dog or a criminal out there in the fields in Georgia. So I'm saying they have different ways now of doing the same thing. Nothing really has changed. But they thought Obama would make up for everything that had gone wrong all that time, and it didn't. That's why I'm saying I voted for him. Yes, I support him. I was very, very proud because the picture changed up on the wall. Not all white people up there. We got a black up there now. But I knew that you know how they started doing him after a while, don't you? It's not good. But I really do worry about things. Things right now, if you ask me, are much worse than they were when I was growing up. Because when I was growing up, Brianna, I kind of knew what my place was and how to stay there and how to get around a lot of unpleasantries. Your generation has grown up so that you don't know what your place is because you have been told that you're equal, you're free, you got these rights, and you have access to this and that and the other, when that's not the truth, not really the truth. So I think I'm better off than many who think they have arrived because they can go buy the same car, live in the same house. It's the same attitude, okay? And that's what hurts me. I'm saying I've lived all these years and expected all these changes with every new legislation, and there really aren't any changes, not really. So that hurts me. And all I worked for didn't mean a thing, you know what I'm saying? Right? So that's where I am right now.
So with that, we're going to, I'm going to stop the recording. Here we go.